Here we are on the FLFnetwork.com/live rally, and we are here with Sheriff Daryl Wheeler. He is sheriff in Bonners County, Idaho, where a lot of people might know where Coeur d'Alene is, which I believe that's correct.
We're north of Coeur d'Alene.
Oh, you're north.
Sandpoint.
Sandpoint, and like Bonners Ferry.
Actually, that's south of Bonners Ferry.
South of Bonners. Okay, so I'm making your county bigger than it actually is. Okay, so he is a sheriff in Bonners County, Idaho, and he's. It was an interesting talk from the standpoint. I think most of us, we kind of know you vote for the local sheriff guy, but I'm not sure we know the tiers of law enforcement.
Right.
We usually have the run-in with the local police, but then there's a sheriff. Would you mind just kind of explaining maybe some of the differences as far as what law enforcement levels are, if that makes
sense? Glad to. Yeah. So there's different levels of law enforcement in each state. So each city has city police departments that are set up, and statutorily the city council set that up, and it's a municipal law enforcement agency, and they do traffic and they issue tickets, and they actually work for the city council. So they're accountable to the council, not the state police are accountable, and they run the state, and they do traffic investigation and accident investigation. They write tickets, and they do those kind of things. What's unique about the sheriff is that's the only law enforcement office in the state that is elected by the people and is accountable to the people. The chief of police could be fired at the whim of the city council. The head of the state police could be fired any time because they work for the governor. And so the sheriff that position is very, very unique, and they're the chief law enforcement officer of that county, and they are not accountable to anybody but the people. The governor cannot tell them what to do. The president cannot tell them to do. A court cannot direct them how to do their job. They're autonomous, and it's a very unique situation, and they have a lot of power and authority.
Are you the most powerful man in America?
Well, I'm not. No.
Or in your county?
Yeah, Jesus Christ is the most powerful, but no. I'm the chief law enforcement, so yes. As far as nobody, I don't answer to anybody.
Okay.
Except if you complain to me, you're one of my constituents, and I'd listen to you.
Okay, very good. And so in broad conservative realms right now, we're kind of at a crossroads with respect to the police. In one sense, generally speaking, Christians are affirmative of police, but then we also have this rub with the police right now. What's a good way for Christians to kind of navigate these strange waters of a proper submission? So, like, if I get pulled over, my hands are 10 and 2, dome light on, yes sir,
Sure.
yes sir, yes sir, pure submission. Like,
right.
and because when you show up at my door in some way, as a Christian, I'm operating from the assumption you're a minister of wrath. And so when I'm not sitting there going, oh, you're not the person I want to try to flex my muscles with. And I assume, basic American principles going forward that I'll have my day in court if things go sideways.
Sure.
But yet, Gabe got arrested, and we're at a strange place of, possibly police overstepping their authority in certain realms and even navigating those waters. So what's a good way, I guess the question is, what's a good way for Christians to navigate the waters of a proper submission to you showing up and yet pushing back? Since you're a Christian in the position of authority, trying to balance that, how do we push back and yet not push back in a proper submission?
Probably the best advice I can give to anybody, and when they have contact with the police in any state or whatever branch, if it's a state police or city or county, is just follow the orders of the officer, and things will most likely just be fine. It's those people that push back and challenge authority. Sometimes when you have somebody that's less experienced, you kind of challenge their authority, and that can also oftentimes turn into a bad thing. But primarily, the duty of the police officers are to follow the Constitution, follow state law, and not overexert the power that they have. And often, when you have problems with some of these police officers that are going beyond the rule of law, is they sometimes think that they need a tripod to hold their badge up, and they have that authority that they don't. They're really a servant, and they should have that attitude of a servant.
Yeah.
So when it comes to Gabe and what they did, so it's really interesting. We just went through. I personally went through a lawsuit suing the city of Sandpoint because they had a contractual agreement with the festival at Sandpoint, and the festival refused to allow citizens with firearms into a city park.
Okay.
And in Idaho, our laws, 183202J, states that any county, city, county property that has property, you cannot prohibit someone from being in possession of a firearm. It's guaranteed in the state. Unfortunately, when the legislature passed that, there was no penalty for it. So there was no way that we can prosecute anyone who prohibits that action. So I sued the city of Sandpoint.
Was that an action of the sheriff? So like, it's like sheriff of Bonner County versus the city of Sandpoint.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Cool.
And so it was a two-pronged question. Does the city of Sandpoint have an agreement, a lease agreement with the Festival of Sandpoint, and does that property that the city leased out now become private property? And then the second one was it affected my ministerial duties of running the jail. I knew it was contrary to law and it was unlawful, and if anybody was arrested for being prohibited from carrying a firearm and they were arrested for that, they would come to my jail, and when the federal lawsuit comes, they would be naming Sandpoint Police Department and also Bonner County Sheriff because I let them in the jail. But what was nice about the ruling of the judge, he ruled that, first of all, that I had no standing in the case, which I think was frivolous, but he did say that I have discretion in who I let in the jail, which let me off the hook.
Yeah.
So in the case, if someone is arrested unlawfully, I do not have to let them be booked into my jail. And see, in the case,
is that a split-second decision though? Like they show up, I'm cuffed,
yeah.
I'm shut at the door, and you're.
Yeah, the judge said, yes, Sheriff, you have that authority and you have that discretion. So in the case of Gabe, if he was arrested by the city and he showed up at my jail, I'd tell the officer, you better give him a citation because he's not coming in my jail.
Okay.
Because this is an unlawful arrest. Because the judge has given me that discretion. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I would have handled it in my county.
But how do you make that split second? You know what I mean? Like,
you don't. I mean, I've got to be aware of things. I mean, things that happen at 2 a.m, obvious I don't. But with something that gets so political, like psalm singing and arresting somebody because they didn't have a mask, obviously something that politically action, I'd be notified of it, and I'd be instructing my deputies at the jail. If someone from the city comes in and arrests somebody as a result of that, send them away and give them a citation because they're not coming in.
Then, like, in the relationship between you and the other sheriffs, even as we were walking over here, people are pepping with questions about other sheriffs around the country, and like, you know, I doubt you have dibs on every sheriff in the country.
No,
so like, and listen to you talk and like understanding the Constitution, trying to understand that you're a servant and people have rights, like. In general, that's not the average. I don't know. I can't say it's not the average disposition of police. I don't want to make that claim.
Right.
In general, in our culture at this point, I feel like the basic disposition of politicians, they use the rhetoric of, oh, we're here to serve, but you're just like, wink, wink. You know what I mean?
Right.
But that's not really it. And so in your position of a sheriff of a county with your deputies and then interacting with other law enforcement, do you think the basic disposition is generally one of service, or is it like a career? Is it a job? Because like the idea that I'm there to serve really is a turning on head oftentimes, I think, of what's often being pursued, a bunch of other gains. And so have you found, like, as you interact with other law enforcement and other sheriffs, is that a common disposition? Because I feel like it's way off the radar.
So it really depends on the culture of the agency. That's really who's ever at the top sets the standards.
Yeah.
So if you have a sheriff that doesn't care about the Constitution and he's just trying to hire people to do the job and just get things done, you're probably not going to have the quality of law enforcement that you have in Bonner County, because I've said, listen, we're going to follow the Constitution. We're going to honor people. This is a service. And people, at least who work for me, understand that and realize it. They treat people with respect, and they understand the needs of the community. And so that's probably the biggest difference. So I can't go back and go around the country and say, well, this is a good police department and that's a good sheriff. I mean, they need to be actually discerned by those people who live in the city or the county, and make it known to them if you're happy with them or if you're unhappy with them. And ask for change.
Yeah, and as you bump into other law enforcement, I am in Moscow, so and even the day when Gabe was arrested, you hear the police like, "Hey, we don't want to do this." You know what I mean? Like, and so and I felt like their hands. And as I was listening to them, there's like this weird conflict where you feel like a little bit their hands are tied. They're like, what? Like there is that like, oh, we're doing what we're told. What are we supposed to be doing here? And you just see all the conflict from bad laws to like, how do we enforce this? How do we say no to our job? And so I guess even as a Christian and as a police officer, sheriff, police officer, law enforcement, how do you go about navigating those waters?
Well, each police officer has to make a decision what they're going to do personally. And I've seen some officers work for agencies who have that type of outlook, and they just leave and go to work for another agency. So you've got to personally, as a police officer, make that decision. What am I going to do? Am I going to step over that line? I mean, obviously, these mask mandates and the things that are happening, for an officer to arrest somebody for not wearing a mask, I mean, that's ludicrous. Where have we gone in our country that we're doing that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got arrested once. I do open air preaching on college campuses, preaching in Youngstown, Ohio. I got arrested, and it was one of those things. It was the first time in my life where. So growing up, I'd have run-ins, very minimal runs with the police. I was a skateboarder. You have these little run-ins and all that sort of stuff. And it was always, and my parents were always like, oh, no, the police are always right. You know what I mean? And that was my natural disposition all growing up. So I get arrested in Youngstown, Ohio for preaching, and I literally get like a shoulder in my back from the cop. And then as he writes a police report, he said he identified himself to me 3 times, and I wouldn't cooperate. And then like as I was reading the police report, I was like, none of this is true. And it was like the first time. It was almost like one of those days like you were let down in America, because you're like my whole life I was told they always do right. And so how do you police your own department in those things, ensuring that you have these individuals who are like, yeah, like he totally cooked the books on what happened that day with me.
So we have body cameras. So anytime someone's arrested, have contact on investigation, we have body cameras. We have cameras in the cars. And I investigate, my command staff investigates every complaint, and we see if it's really happened. So often, I believed what you did, and you probably just got a bad cop that probably was an unbeliever, was a pagan, and he just, I'm going to tell this Christian what I think.
Yeah. And he really, because I'm sitting there, and I'm handcuffed in a cell, and he's yelling at me, you want to talk about righteousness? And so he's yelling about that. So it was very personal on a level, and I realized that. So I was like, okay.
As sheriff, I get complaints of our officers, and most people don't know that we record them. Mm-hmm. And I've had people come into my office and say, listen, this officer did this, and he told me this, and he told me this, and I want his job. And so before they come to my office, I have my staff make a copy of the video, and I put it down on the table, and I says, ma'am, I've got a copy of the interaction. Would you like to watch that together with me, and we can go over it? Oh, no, I don't think that's necessary. I mean, this literally happened. So in your position, do you generally in favor of body cams, anti-body cams? Oh, I'm totally in favor.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Because as a citizen,
it protects you as a citizen, and it also protects the officer.
Okay.
And if I trust my officers for them doing the right thing all the time, it's a win-win for me.
Okay. Yeah, because it's one of those things. I can be a weirdo on surveillance, and so it's like one of those things. Like just the idea that it's always being filmed. I go back and forth. Like, obviously, there are times like, oh, I'm so glad they had a camera. Other times, like, oh, are they just surveilling? You know what I mean? Sure. Taking in more surveillance. So I don't know if I'm just a paranoid nut or what. So I was always curious, like, what police actually thought of it, because it's one of those things. Like, it's often pushed politically, but you're not sure if it's a good idea, a bad idea, and so I was kind of.
I think it's a great idea.
Okay, good. And so I guess. To our audience, FLF people, as you're thinking through being a police officer, a sheriff, what can we do as Christians with our local police department as well? So, and that's even one of the things. Does every county have a sheriff? Is that what it is?
Yes, every county has a sheriff.
So how do we get kind of politically involved with law enforcement, be it the local police, city police? So like in Moscow, our sheriff, our police. What can we do to really serve them in many ways? Because like I do want to be at their door and let them know we're for you guys. Right? Like right now there's obviously tension in Moscow, us and the police.
Right.
Ideally, I don't want to be there. I want them to know, no, we're back. We're for you. We do believe you have a ministry here. We want you to be faithful in that ministry. So what can we as Christians do? What can other Christians do around the country to interact with their law enforcement to say, we want to support you, and yet at the same time, we want to hold you accountable? What's a good way to go about that that's not arrogant, haughty, proud?
Sure. The most important thing that you can do as the citizens, they could pray for the law enforcement executive, either the chief or the sheriff.
And that's just in the Bible.
I mean,
that's just pray for those in authority. That's,
sure.
Yeah,
really pray for their success and pray that, the God and the Holy Spirit touches their heart to lead them to be righteous men or women and do the right thing all the time. That's really important. But you can get involved and you can actually get an appointment with the sheriff or the chief of police, and you can ask him or her yourself and say, what can we do? We have a National Day of Prayer coming up next week, and they have a group or organization. They take a name from every single police officer in our county, and they issue that name and they give it to an individual or a family, and they pray for them. They make a commitment. We're going to pray for that officer every single day.
Great.
That thing, encouraging. What you can do is just tell them that how much you appreciate them. You can do rallies. We have had rallies, pro-police rallies, where we've had in Sandpoint a couple hundred people come out, and we love this and support the police and come out. We're kind of unique here in North Idaho because we don't have those political pressures in the other states, and the people here. I'm in Rapid City, South Carolina, but anyway, or South Dakota. But anyway, in my hometown, they really appreciate the police and the sacrifices they make, and so. Those are just some of the things. Get involved, and if it's the sheriff, and if he's a Republican, get involved in the Republican Party and become a precinct committeeman and get involved. I go to every meeting, every Central Republican Committee, give an update. I brush my arms with people and talk to them and answer questions, and I'm just there as a servant. And
you made a comment. I kind of missed it because I was getting up and doing some things coming in and out of your talk, but you made a comment, I think you made reference to running for city commissioner, or maybe just Gabe was, and maybe I misunderstood you, but did you encourage people to run for?
No, I did.
Like, don't run for sheriff. That's
no,
my job.
I don't want. Yeah, that was kind of a joke. I don't want you to run for sheriff, but no, it's really important because we've got to do this. A local government is more important. What's happening in the state and even in the nation. We have very, very, very few controls over what happened. But when you're talking about the city and the county, you have control over who you elect. If you want to elect godly men or women to those positions, and your vote in that county can make a difference. And if you talk to enough people, you can get the right people to represent. And I think I was trying to make it a point that the sheriff's job is very difficult, but if they don't have the support of the county commissioners and the budgetary support to do their mission and have those funds, it becomes really difficult for them. And the same way with the city council. If you vote in godly men and women into the city council, they direct the priorities for that police department.
Very good. All right, two other quick questions, or relatively quick questions. So you are a Christian, and how long have you been a Christian? And if you don't mind me asking, what church are you involved with? Like, not necessarily specific, but even like background, because you sounded to me, you seem sympathetic to our circles. To some, I heard you quoting David Chilton and some of these other men, and so you obviously have like a certain.
I'm Presbyterian.
Okay. I was kind of curious about. You're like, it's not your normal.
I'm
sheriff.
Reformed.
Okay. That's not your average quote to be rattling off David Chilton, and so, but it is Northern Idaho, so it's its own ball game up there. So
sure.
And then where are you originally from? I think you mentioned California.
I'm originally from the San Francisco Bay Area. I grew up in the Sacramento area, and then I moved back to the Bay Area to be a police officer.
Okay. And then you finally had enough of the Bay Area.
I finally had enough, and in '98 I moved from California and took my family here. So we've been here this summer 23 years.
And Bonners Ferry was willing to elect a man from the Bay Area?
Bonner County. They were. Yeah, actually. I guess God was preparing me for this for this job, I ran the first time in 2008. We had 5 candidates running, one current sheriff and one ex-sheriff and myself and a couple other guys, and I got 42% of the vote out of 5 people. So that,
that's a pretty good win. That's a pretty good win. Yeah, because I lived in LA and I spent a handful of time in the Bay Area and northern Idaho from the Bay Area, even Sacramento. Those are just radically different cultures, radically different towns, and even I'd imagine disposition of the people towards the police. Especially, I feel like anytime I was in Oakland, there's a radically anti-police. You know what I mean? Almost like they prefer the run by the Black Panther Party than they are by local police.
Incidentally, that's where I went to the police academy.
Oh, was it really?
Oakland. So,
okay.
So I know those streets, and I know that area very well.
Yeah, so just a radically different culture. Well, we appreciate your time. We appreciate your talk. And, seriously, get involved in your county government. Get involved with running for commissioner. I have no idea how you ratchet up to become a sheriff. I don't know what would be do you have to be like a...
Well, it helps to have law enforcement. I've been in law enforcement for 35 years. So I started in the late 80s and worked for several agencies and, have a lot of experience.
Okay, so you roughly had 20 years before you ran.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And so, get involved. We need godly people. And as Daryl Wheeler, as he was saying, we have a lot of say on a county level. It's hard to win on a national level. It's hard to have a lot of say on a national level, but we can have a lot of say on the local, city, and county level. And then from there, you can push back. So if you get a chance, let's just talk, because he's running through doctrine of lesser magistrates. There's like just kind of a civil government lesson going on in your talk. So there's a lot there to digest and even just whet your appetite to be like, okay, what is the doctrine of lesser magistrate, and how do we as Christians think it through and begin to apply it? So I'm glad there's godly men in office running sheriff and the police department, because as Christians, I waver back and forth right now of how do we push back, how do I submit, and I want to be on their side, I want to oppose them, and as Christians we want to be humble in it and not arrogant and jerks and everything else. So appreciate your time. Thank you for coming to the Fight Laugh Feast Network and everything else. So God bless you.
All right. God bless.